there is now a highly evolving understanding of the nature of chronic, so-called chronic disease. And whether it's alcoholism or cancer, or whether it's any criminal behavior or drug addiction, or whether it's, high blood pressure or or whatever the outcome is, the fundamentals are always the same. There was a big study done in the States where they studied people for a long period of time, published in 1994, like 25 years ago almost, or 25 years ago, and which showed that the early life traumas and what are called adverse childhood experiences mean that life can be 50% shorter, cut in half, if you have a really bad set of traumas early in your life, of circumstances. And that's only the beginning of it. This study didn't focus on what else goes with that, which also includes usually bad nutrition, poor housing, poor social structures, lots of toxicity, and all sorts of other things. And it certainly didn't focus on all the issues. So what we've done is we've created a system called TIPS, which we think, and have researched carefully over years, represents all the issues involved in creating chronic disease, so-called chronic disease. And these are 4 categories, quite simple to understand: toxins, infections, psychological trauma, and physical trauma. And the key thing about these is the longevity of them. So you can have a psychological trauma like incest in the family, which goes back generation after generation after generation. It didn't just occur in rich people, which Freud discovered and then had to keep quiet about, or reverse, because it was so horrendous to say it was happening in the upper classes of Austria. But actually it occurs in poor families, large families. It's routine in all sorts of families in the past, and it comes down to the present day. So any trauma which is significant usually has a lot of generations of longevity to it. Nowadays they call that genetics, but actually it's the same thing as far as I can see, as a long-term history in the family. And this applies to toxins, applies to infections. So if Ireland was riddled with TB, and in many parts of Ireland, 50% of the population died before the age of 30 from tuberculosis, even in my lifetime. So the infectious diseases, and this goes back many, many, many generations. So infectious diseases, toxins like lead, for example, in paint, has an effect going down generations. Toxins used by potters in making fancy pots means that potters often had diseases of the nervous structure from metal toxicity. There's a whole book on toxins called Hunter's Diseases of Occupations, which is about the toxicity of various occupations. And it's in its like 39th edition or something, and compiled by experts. And it shows you all gives you the history of how these diseases, how these toxins existed in the past. And it would also, like coal miners, for example, they would have dust problems. Coal miners didn't live long lives. They died from the dust. So toxins, infections, psychological trauma, and physical trauma. Physical trauma, like in Africa, what we would do in the clinics, what we do in African clinics, is the first question with someone with a chronic disease is to ask them what happened before you got sick. And if it's falling off a ladder, you treat them for injury, and what chronic disease, so the chronic problem that's come about, usually often resolves. So they fell off a ladder, they've now got a painful back. They don't associate it with falling off the ladder, but obviously they've dislocated their spine. You treat them for the injury, and the muscles relax, and the spine realigns, and the problem goes away. Not so easy in the West, but fundamentally, Physical trauma is a common phenomenon in the West. Operations are a really common trauma in the West because we have lots of surgery nowadays and have done for generations. And surgery in itself can be very toxic as a physical trauma because it's done under anesthetic, so we don't know about it when we get back up and running. And it's buried. The anesthetic has the effect of burying it deep in our energetic body out of sight. But once you get, so early childhood operations then combine with late cancer operations, and you get a deadly combination which creates a big trauma and a big blockage in the body energy. And treating that can release a lot of problems which a person can have. So those are that's the tips, the core issues of how we address chronic diseases with tips. The toxins, infections, in psychological and physical traumas. And we've carefully researched this systematically through all sorts of experts in holistic medicine and in traditional medicine, open-minded professors. And far as we can see, it covers all the issues, all the things that people do, all the ways, and it's the most inclusive system that we've found, and we haven't found any system that is outside of it.